Hello, my name is Paul Boag, and today I want to talk to you very briefly about micro interactions and how they can actually help the engagement on your landing pages and websites. And the reason I bring this particular subject up today is because of the recent launch of the iPhone 16. Not that the iPhone 16 is directly related to this subject, but the landing page that Apple have launched definitely is. You see, Apple love to use these kind of micro interactions on their websites, whether it be videos, whether it be carousels, whether it be animation. All of these different interactive elements they bring together to create what feels like a very compelling and polished experience. So in this lesson, I want to look very briefly at the types of interactions that are available, but also the potential dangers of them to see whether they are actually worth implementing on your website. So let's start with the different types of interactions that are available. Well, there are basically three types of interactions you will encounter regularly. The first are what I call delighters. Now, these exist for no other reason than to make the user smile. And I'll talk about why that matters in just a moment. But essentially, they have no practical application. Then the second type are your basic interactions. These are the kinds of things that help usability within your website. And the third are feedback. So these are interactions that feed back information to the user and helps inform their further interactions. And each of these in turn help to improve the engagement that a user has with your website, and by extension helps improve your conversion rate. So let's look at each in turn, beginning with delighters. Now, these might be pointless in the sense that they don't provide any practical benefit, but they do create a positive association. If you can get a user smiling as they interact with your website, or even being mildly impressed by your website, that has a huge benefit. And that's because of the halo effect. Our tendency to associate both positive and negative impressions in one area with our opinions or our feelings in another. Put another way, if you can make people smile at your website, if your website impresses them, then they're going to feel positive about your product and the service that you're selling, and by extension, that's going to improve your conversion rate. And actually, don't underestimate how powerful it is to put somebody in a positive frame of mind. If they're in a positive frame of mind when they're interacting with your website, this has been shown time and time again to broaden people's attention and increase their cognitive resources. Put another way, they're going to spend longer on your website and they're going to remember more about it and they're going to feel more positive about it. So what exactly is a design delighter? Well, as I said, they're pretty pointless on a superficial level. So take, for example, the Arc browser that is available on iOS. And if you close all the tabs in your Arc browser, you're left with the Arc logo. But what isn't immediately obvious is that you can spin that logo or shoot it around the screen and you get this nice haptic feedback from it. Basically, they've built a fidget spinner into their application, and it is so satisfying to play with and to use. Now, obviously, this doesn't in any way improve the usability of the browser, but it does make you smile when you first encounter it. And you do come back to it and fiddle with it every time. It creates a positive association. Or another silly little example is the Smashing Magazine website, where if you roll over the image of the author, it does this little animation. Does that animation help with anything? Absolutely not. But when you first discover it, you have a little smile. And you notice that their whole website is riddled with these tiny little details that catch you by surprise and that have a positive view or influence over how you see this particular site and its content. But let's look at the kind of more fundamental interactions that you can add to your site. These are the kinds of things that improve the usability of your site and, maybe slightly more surprisingly, the amount of information that you will retain. One of the big problems with websites is we often overwhelm people with too much information all in one go. But by adding micro interactions into your interface, you can break up that information and make it much easier to digest. And actually, the Apple website is a really good example of this. Let's take, for example, that iPhone page I mentioned earlier. Notice how it uses carousels to introduce different features one after another, rather than just presenting them to you all at once and potentially overwhelming you. You can move through the web page. I was going to say application because it's almost working like an application at your own pace and to your own level of detail. But they use it elsewhere on the site as well. Like, for example, when you're trying to pick a Mac to buy, you've got these different pieces of information that they give you a short introduction, but you could click to find out more information that will take you deeper into the application. But there is a third type of micro interaction you might want to add, and that is feedback interactions. Now, these are really worthwhile adding because they give the user confidence they're heading in the right direction and they're doing the right thing. So, for example, on a lot of e-commerce sites, when you click to add something to the shopping basket, unless you spot in that top right hand corner that it's added one item to the basket, it's very easy to miss that. Okay. However, if the button itself animates the point where you're currently clicking, then it's a lot more obvious. So a tiny little interaction here can make it clear that an item has been added to your cart. And equally, when you do things like enter passwords as well, you could have a situation where if somebody is entering the password and it's not visible, your little person covers their eyes, while if you want to make the password visible, the little person uncovers their eyes. And that kind of indicates the current state of what you're looking at. Now, there could be argued that this is nothing more than a delighter, but that's the thing. Something could be a delighter and a bit of feedback at the same time. So all of this sounds really good, doesn't it? We can add lots of interactions to our website and it will make a big difference to engagement, retention of information, and your conversion rate. But there are dangers too. And if you use it too much, you can run into issues. And I would actually argue that Apple have done this to some degree, because on those pages that are heavy and use lots of interactions, they are seeing performance hits. And performance has a direct relationship both to how long someone stays engaged with a website and to your conversion rate. So you have to use these things with a light touch. Don't overdo it. Too much video, too much interaction, too many of these little micro interactions can really bog down a site and slow it down. And that's going to affect both your engagement, your conversion, and your SEO positioning as well. So use it carefully. Secondly, you can create accessibility problems. Now, it might be that you would argue that a disabled audience is not particularly important to you. Now, I would quibble with that because disabled people have incredible spending power. However, when I talk about accessibility, I'm talking in a very broad sense. So, for example, you can find that these light levels of interaction can cause problems on people with a slower connection or people that are using mobile devices. And that is a vast majority of our audience these days. Often it can really slow down a web page if you have too many of these interactions going on. So again, keep it light, do it a little bit, but don't overdo it. And finally, these things can be a distraction as well. Video backgrounds are a great example of this. When they're constantly animating in the background, that can get really annoying really quickly and make it hard for you to read text. Equally, carousels that automatically move on and are constantly flicking. So my advice is, if you're going to use these kind of interaction elements, try and make it so that they only work if a user is actually interacting with them. Don't just have them running on a loop. So there you go. I would encourage you to go away after watching this video, look for opportunities to integrate a little bit of interaction into the website, whether it be just pure fun design delighters, whether it be things that increase usability and chunk up your content so you don't overwhelm people, or alternatively to give them a little bit of feedback. But as well as looking for opportunities, if you already have interactions like this on your website, be very careful. Check that they're not impacting the performance of your website. Check that they work well on mobile devices. And just be really careful that you're not distracting people from what it is that you want them to do.